Salam, peace be upon you. My name is Muhammad Laik Siddiqui, the father of Holoface. We have now certified a very strict chain, and we must keep it clean. We only speak inside licensed finite windows, with passports, coherence checks, identifiability, and honesty sealing for jet order, and full uncertainty lineage. We can lift phi locally, build A equals D phi tilde, take finite jets up to n max, collapse what depends on description, and keep only invariants. We learned to compress into a minimal invariant basis, and we certified stability as persistence under admissible perturbations without any time story. Now listen carefully, because part 38 is where everyday life finally meets the compiler. People keep asking, okay, but where are the things? Where is the stone? Where is the cup? Where is the tree? Where is the electron? Where is the star? Where is the person? Where is the company? Where is the mountain? And the old habit, almost everybody's habit, is to answer with a single word that feels like it solves the problem. Substance. As if there is some secret stuff hiding behind what we measure, and that stuff is what the thing really is. But we cannot use that word as a primitive. Not in holophase, not in episode 14, not in phi0, the compiler layer. Because substance is not something we can certify from comparisons. It is not something we can audit. It is not something we can replicate. It is not something that survives the invariance gate because it is never even defined as an output of the toolchain. So what do we put in its place? We put something stricter, something more honest, something that is actually how science and ordinary life already function when they're at their best. We replace substance with certificate. Let's start with a scene you can feel. Imagine we walk into a jeweler's shop. Someone places a rough stone on the counter. The stone looks like anything. If we only stare at it, we can tell stories forever. But stories do not certify. So the jeweler does what the compiler does. The jeweler chooses a window. The jeweler has a passport. Which light, which instrument, which calibration. The jeweler measures. Not everything, only what can be compared publicly. Hardness, density, how it bends light, crystal pattern. A few signatures that don't care about our mood or our poetry. Then the jeweler does something powerful. They don't say, I feel it is a diamond. They don't say, it has diamond substance. They say, these measured signatures fall inside the stable signature cluster that we legally and scientifically call diamond. And then they print a certificate. That certificate is not a magical essence. It is a public claim that can be audited. It is a name attached to a pattern. That is our move. In part 38, we certify the rule. An entity is not a substance. An entity is a stable invariant signature cluster that has earned a name. A named cluster in invariant space with a certified stability radius. In simpler words, a thing is what stays the same, in the right way, when we look again under fair changes. Now we must keep the episode 14 firewall clean, so we do not say stays the same over time. That would be a time story. We are not doing dynamics. We say it stays the same across admissible perturbations and across overlapping windows and across redescriptions within declared uncertainty budgets. That is, stability and invariance together turned into identity. And we must keep triunity visible because it prevents a common drift. Every certified structure we use to define an entity must respect the triunity readouts. Omega, kappa, nu. Omega is cadence, kappa is texture, nu is drift. We never treat time, space, motion as primitives. We only treat omega, kappa, nu as labels for readouts of one differentiation. So when we talk about an object, we are not secretly smuggling a thing moving in space through time. We are talking about a stable signature in the readouts within certified domains. Now, before we go further, we must speak the pipeline line at least once, as promised, so the listener hears the whole machine as one breath. Licensed window, then passport and coherence and identifiability, then nmax and uncertainty, then local lift, then cuts if needed, then excisions, then certified domain D, then A equals D phi tilde, then finite jets up to nmax, then invariance collapse, then topology and defects, then invariant basis, then stability and entities, then scarce certification, then escape test, then handoff. Good. Deadline matters, because Part 38 is not a new philosophy. It is simply the last output stage of that pipeline, the promotion from stable signature into named entity. Now let's define our tokens in audio-friendly speech. We still have the only primitive, phi, pronounced phi, a map from X to S1. That means phi colon X to S1. X is the set of events we are talking about inside the licensed window. S1 is the circle, cyclic comparability. So phi does not tell you substance. Phi gives you the permission to compare and order cyclically. We never speak absolute phi. We only speak differences, delta phi inside windows. We lift locally when legal, phi tilde the local lift. Then A equals D phi tilde, pronounced A equals D phi tilde. That A is our first derivative carrier, our local comparison gradient, so to speak. Still not a geometry primitive, just a compiled derivative object with a domain. Then we build jets, finite jets, up to the ceiling nmax, because we promised honesty. Above the ceiling is undefined. Then we collapse description dependence. What survives are invariants, the things that do not change when we change lifts, cuts, charts, and other admissible redescriptions. Then, in Part 36, we required compression. We do not keep an endless list of observables if they reduce to a smaller invariant basis. Then, in Part 37, we required stability. Invariants must persist under admissible perturbations within uncertainty budgets and replicate across small passport shifts. Now, Part 38 says, once you have a stable invariant signature, you may give it a name. That name is an entity label. That label is a certificate, not an essence. Here is the clean core sentence we carry. An object is a stable certificate. Now we must make that precise but still simple. Think of a passport photo. A passport photo is not you. It is not your soul. It is not your substance. It is a compact signature that stays similar enough under fair changes that border officers can say, yes, this is the same person as the certificate claims. But notice something crucial. Identity disputes happen when the signature becomes unstable or when the passport rules are vague. If the lighting is terrible, the camera is low quality, the picture is 10 years old and you grew a beard, then the signature match can fail. That does not mean you cease to exist. It means the certification protocol is weak in that window. So our entity framework does not make reality fragile. It makes our claims honest. It lets us say, in this window, with this passport, we can or cannot certify the entity label. That is exactly what science and law already do. Holophase simply refuses to pretend otherwise. Now we introduce the entity mechanism in the strict episode 14 way, with gates, without turning it into a dry checklist. We will weave the gates as story beats, like a real audit that a careful team would run. First bit. We need the signature template. An entity type is defined by a signature template, a small set of invariant features we expect to find together. For a diamond, the template is a cluster: hardness, refractive index, density, crystal lattice pattern. For an electron, the template is a cluster: charge -1 in units of E, spin 1/2, a stable mass readout around 0.511 megaelectron-volts over c squared, and other invariants. For mountain, it could be a cluster: stable elevation profile, rock composition signatures, gravitational field deviations, and so on. Now, second bit. We need stability radius. It is not enough to say these are the signatures. We must certify how robust they are. How much noise can we add to the measurement before the signature stops matching? How much can the passport vary? Slightly different instrument calibration, slightly different boundary of the window, before the label breaks. That robustness size is the stability radius. If you want a clean phrase, the stability radius is how far you can jiggle the world and your instrument within admissible limits and still land in the same signature cluster. Now, third bit, the label assignment. A specific observed case, call it an instance, gets a signature vector extracted from its window. If that signature lands inside the entity type cluster, within the stability radius and within uncertainty budgets, then the label is certified for that instance. And that is all an entity is at this layer. No substance, no metaphysical glue, no mysterious thisness, just a disciplined, replicable, auditable certificate. Now, because people love to smuggle stories, let's block the most common drift. Someone will say, so you're saying a thing is just a bunch of numbers? No, we are saying the only public meaning we can ever share is through certified comparisons. A thing in public language is the stable pattern that shows up in those comparisons. Private experience may be richer, reality may be deeper. But episode 14 is not allowed to turn that into primitives. Episode 14 is the compiler for public structure. So we keep our promise. Episode 14 does not describe reality. It specifies the conditions under which reality can be described at all. Now let's do the mandatory invariance stress test, because if we cannot stress test, we are not doing holophase, we are doing vibes. Take an entity candidate. Say we claim this is an electron, or this is this diamond, or this is that mountain. We must test. If we change phi by adding a constant, phi goes to phi plus constant, does the entity label change? It must not, because only differences matter. We must test. If we shift the local lift, phi tilde goes to phi tilde plus constant, does the signature change? The signature must be based on invariance built from A equals d phi tilde and other allowed structures, not on absolute lift values. We must test. If we change charts, if we describe the same data with different coordinates or different parameterizations, does the signature extraction yield the same invariant cluster? If not, our signature is not truly invariant. We must test. If cuts exist and we relocate the cut, do we get the same entity label? If the label depends on cut placement, it is not public and must be rejected. So the stress test result we demand is simple. The label is invariant under admissible redescriptions. Good, that is the invariance gate woven into entity certification. Now we must also enforce the overlap survival rule, because reality is not one window. If you only see something in one instrument and it disappears in another overlapping instrument, you do not get to call it an entity. You get to call it unresolved. So overlap survival means two certified windows overlap, each independently extract signatures. In the overlap, the entity label must agree, after allowing admissible redescriptions and uncertainty budgets. If they disagree, then we do not argue metaphysics. We run the audit. Is it a passport mismatch? Is it a stability radius violation? Is it an identifiability failure? Is it aliasing? Is it illegal domain use? Is it a guard failure? That is the power of this approach. Identity disputes become technical, not mystical. Now, because you asked for engaging examples across scales, we will walk through three, like a ladder: small, human scale, cosmic scale. And while we do, keep noticing. We never need substance. We only need stable invariant signature clusters. First example, the stone in your hand. You pick up a stone from a river. You show it to a friend. You both agree it is the same stone, even if you rotate it, wet it, dry it, shine a flashlight, scratch it lightly. What is happening? You are doing entity certification with your nervous system. Your senses extract signatures, shape contours, weight feel, texture, color pattern. Then you check stability. If you change lighting or angle, the signature remains in the same cluster. If you chip a tiny corner, it still matches within your stability radius for same stone. And if you replace the entire stone with another similar stone, at some point the signature drifts outside the radius and you say, no, that's not it. Notice, no metaphysics required. Now, second example, the ship of Theseus, because it forces honesty. The classic paradox asks, if you replace every plank of a ship, is it the same ship? In holophase language, we refuse to treat the question as one sacred yes or no. We ask, what is the entity type that ship defined to be in public language? If your entity template is legal, registration number, ownership records, continuous maintenance logs, then the same ship label can survive plank replacement, as long as those signatures remain stable. If your entity template is material, made of these original planks, then the label will fail as planks are replaced, because the signature cluster drifts outside the radius. If your template is geometric and functional, hull shape within tolerance, displacement, stability in water, propulsion interface, then the label can survive many replacements as long as those invariants stay inside the stability radius. So the paradox dissolves into a clean statement. Identity depends on the certified signature template and its stability radius. If you don't specify the template, you do not have a meaningful public question. You have a story with hidden assumptions. This is not dodging. This is honesty. It forces language to show its passport. Third example, the electron, because it shows the strength of certificate at the deepest scale we can measure. When we say electron, we do not mean a tiny marble of substance. We mean a stable cluster of invariant signatures that shows up in many windows, in many instruments, under many admissible perturbations. Charge -1, spin 1/2, a stable mass readout, a consistent way it couples to electromagnetic fields. And the reason physics works is that this cluster is unbelievably stable. It survives overlap tests between different detectors. It survives redescription. It survives passport variation. It survives perturbations within uncertainty budgets. So electron is one of the strongest certificates human beings have ever earned. Now step back and feel what this does. It turns what exists into an engineering question. Which stable invariant signature clusters can we certify, replicate, and compress? Reality in public language becomes a registry of certificates. Not a registry of stuff, but a registry of patterns that persist. Now we must include the prediction without dynamics requirement. In episode 14, a prediction is not what will happen next. A prediction is a forbiddenness footprint. What must fail if our rule is true, and what failure signature must show up instead. So here's the prediction for part 38, spoken plainly. If entities are stable invariant signatures with certified radii, then identity disputes will not be settled by arguing about essence. They will be settled by audits. And when an identity claim is wrong, the failure will show up as one of these signatures: a stability radius violation, a passport mismatch, an overlap survival failure, an invariance failure under redescription, or an identifiability failure because the window cannot support the needed signature extraction. That is the prediction. If we see a community claiming entities without being able to produce these audit artifacts, then they are not doing public science. They are doing naming by habit. Now we must state the falsifier, because every part must have a clean way to be wrong. The falsifier for part 38 is if an entity label changes under an admissible redescription, while the certified structure is fixed and the stability radius is respected, then our entity identification is not actually tied to invariance. That would mean entity depends on bookkeeping, which is illegal in Phi0. So if you can take the same certified window, apply only allowed redescriptions, lift shift, chart change, cut relocation, and the entity label flips while all certified invariants remain the same, then the entity protocol is broken. Either our signature was not invariant, or our clustering rules smuggled semantics, or our guard and domain typing were illegal. That falsifier is powerful because it doesn't need philosophy. It needs only a clean audit. Now let's make the entity registry feel real in the simplest way. Imagine a library. In a library, a book is not a mystical substance. A book is a catalog entry plus a physical copy that matches the entry's signature: title, author, edition, ISBN, and a few measurable traits. If the cover is changed, but the ISBN and content match, we still label it the same edition. If the content changes beyond tolerance, we label it a different edition. If two copies overlap, one in London, one in Kabul, the catalog says they are the same book type if they match the signature. Now upgrade that metaphor into holophase. Our entity registry is the catalog. The signature template is the ISBN-like rule. The stability radius is the tolerance for measurement noise and admissible variation. The instances are specific observed cases. And the registry does not pretend to be the universe. It is a public ledger of what we can certify. Now we must keep no substance clear one more time, because it's the hardest habit to break. When we say this is a rock, we are not denying that the rock has an internal reality. We are simply refusing to call internal reality a primitive in Phi0. We are saying the only thing we can certify publicly is the stable invariant signature cluster. So that is what rock means at this layer. Later layers can build richer stories: dynamics, thermodynamics, meaning, mind, but they will be built on top of these certificates, not smuggled underneath them. Now we must end with the audit artifact and the revocation clause, exactly as episode 14 requires. And we must do it in plain language. So here is what we write to the ledger, what we demand to exist on paper if someone claims an entity. Audit artifact for part 38, in spoken form. We record the window passport ID, we record the masks and excisions, and the certified domain D. We record the coherent status gamma, pass or fail. We record identifiability and the ceiling nmax. We record the uncertainty lineage. We record the invariant stress tests, phi to phi plus constant, lift shift, chart change, cut relocation, and pass or fail. We record the extracted invariant signature vector. We record the clustering rule that maps the signature into an entity label. We record the certified stability radius used for the match. We record overlap survival tests against any overlapping windows. And we record either a certified entity label with a registry ID or a refusal certificate that says uncertifiable with a failure classification. That is the artifact. Now the revocation clause. Simple and sharp. We revoke an entity label if the stability radius is violated, meaning the signature drifts outside the certified cluster under admissible perturbations within the declared uncertainty budgets. Or if overlap survival fails, meaning two overlapping certified windows produce contradictory entity labels that cannot be reconciled by admissible redescription, GAR typing, or uncertainty accounting. Or if invariance fails, meaning the label depends on bookkeeping choices like lift, chart, or cut placement. Or if the domain was illegal, meaning the signature was extracted using unguarded operators or outside the certified domain. If any of those happen, the label is removed from the public ledger and the case is sent to the negative archive with its failure tag. And now we carry the single sentence again, because it must stick in the listener's bones. An object is a stable certificate. That is not poetry. That is a compiler rule. Finally, one small practical note for the listener who wants the full formal backbone behind this narration. If you want to go deeper into the mathematics and the formal proofs, the formal work can be found on Zenodo by searching for holophase. Part 38 complete. We did not add substance. We did not add ghosts. We simply promoted what we already earned, stable invariance, into named entities under audit. Always, peace be upon you.